My name is Sunita and I am the verbal head at GMAT. I have been prepping students for the entrance exams, MBA entrance exams, including GMAT for the last almost a decade now. And today I'm going to talk about a lot of things that I have learned during my this vast experience about RC. So that's a little bit about me. And I would love to hear hello back from all of you out there so that I know you are there. We're going to look at lots of important aspects today. We're going to discuss a lot of important things that trouble you related to RC. So this webinar, as you've already seen, is on the art of involved and evolved reading. And I'm sure a lot of you might be thinking what that is. And is that going to be the mantra, the magic cue for you to be able to solve your RC problems? So we're going to talk about that in detail. I'm going to demonstrate the methodology. The only thing is I want you to just be with me. So hi Utkal, hi Shubham, nice to see you. Hello Julia, once again. Very nice to see you again, Julia. Hope you're doing well, as the others are. And I think I would love to hear from you how you've been doing on the strategies that you learned for your CR and your SC in the earlier part of the webinars. So that would be great if I could just get a feedback on that from the others who are there. Hello, Rutu. Hi, Bhavok. Hello, Simran. Okay, I can see a lot of you are there and perhaps you're a little shy to interact, but guys, I want you to open up to me so that I can help you out. Hello, Liliana. So very nice to see all of you. And I'm guessing you guys are from different parts of the country and the world. Great. All right. So without more ado, let me begin by asking you a question. All right. And the question is very simple, guys. Do you think in GMAT, all the three areas are equally important? That is RC, SC, CR, or is there any particular area of these three which is more important than the others? So let me see. I've got some feedback. Bhavuk says he completed SC from GMAT with 80% accuracy. Very good, Bhavuk. On the GMAT platform, if you have got an overall accuracy of 80%, you stand actually in a very, very good position. I'm guessing that if you're sticking to the methodology, now is the time to fine tune your methodology. So a little more practice to tide over. What you could check for yourself is what is your accuracy in easy questions, medium questions, and difficult questions, okay? Your accuracy for your easy questions should be around 90%. For medium, about 85 to 90, and for hard questions, even with a 65% accuracy, are good to go. So that's there about Bhavuk. Hi, Abhi. Good to see you. Hi, Rajat. Okay, Bhavuk's target is 7. Wonderful, Bhavuk, and all the best for achieving that. So Utkal says all sections are equally important. Mayank says all are equal. You're welcome, Bhavuk. So what about the others, guys? Is there any one section which is more important than the others? You know, in the verbal section itself, is it that, you know, the SC is more important, or CR is more important, or RC is more important? So Mayank and Utkal feel that all sections are equally important. Okay, let me see. Julia says that definitely all are important. However, we should build up our verbal knowledge as be spoken, SC, CR, RC. Yes, Julia, that is definitely the right sequence of learning. Anshul says all are important. Bhavuk says RC is more important since questions are consecutive and you suffer more. Wonderful, Bhavuk. I'm going to talk about that in detail, guys. For those of you who do not already know the importance of RC in GMAT verbal section, I'm going to talk about that because it's very important to understand the importance before you really take RC seriously. So many people I've met, you know, they don't really take RC seriously. And they think that, okay, it's just reading comprehension and we've been doing this since our school days, so what's the big deal? Shubham says RC is the most important. Well, perhaps in a certain way, Shubham, yes. Abhi says SC is more important than CR and CR is more important than RC. Well, Abhi, I don't know about that, but definitely we're going to talk about importance of RC. So Shubham says RC is slightly more than the others, I think. Liliana says RC, 3 answers in a row. Yes, Liliana, the consecutive let's say, pattern of an RC, which is there, is definitely going to make a difference. And Rutu also says that RC is more important. Great, guys. So let's see why RC is more important. Now, I wouldn't go so far to say that RC is more important. Let's be precise. RC has a different kind of importance. That is to say, if you are hoping to score anywhere 700 and above, you have to make sure your RCs are in place. Your accuracy in RCs cannot be lower than 85%. Cannot. Okay. So, well, Utkal, in terms of average score, you might be right. Okay. However, there is a particular aspect to RC. I'm going to show you, I'm going to demonstrate the impact of RC questions on scores. All right. So, yes, Shubham, you get one passage wrong and the graph suffers. Hi, Vishaka. So, we have already started, Vishaka. And I'm going to talk to you about the importance of acing RC questions. Just listen to me carefully, guys, okay? Just listen to me carefully. Now, first and foremost, let us understand that any student on average would face about 3 to 4 passages in the exam, okay? And of these 3 to 4 passages, overall about 12 to 15 questions would come from these passages, which basically means slightly over a third of your total verbal questions come from RCs, all right? And it's an adaptive test, all right? GMAT is an adaptive test, which means if you get RC questions, the RC questions which come in 3s or 4s or even more, if you get them wrong, the consecutive questions will really cost you heavy. I mean, think about it like this. If you're solving one CR question, you don't get it right, you have the opportunity of recovering from that fall in your score with the next SC question or the CR question. But in an RC question, if you have not got the passage right, high chances of you getting 1 or 2 or more incorrect on the RC question. So that is going to really hit your score very badly, all right? Because consecutive mistakes are penalized heavily. Like, it's not just that in RC, if you have consecutive mistakes, you will be penalized heavily. Not that. Even if you get 2 CR questions consecutively wrong or 2 SC questions consecutively wrong, you are still going to be penalized heavily. But the point is, for RC questions, there are higher chances of you getting consecutive questions wrong. And consecutive mistakes anyways are penalized very, very highly. All right. So let's understand this, let's call it algorithm for want of a better word. Okay, and we've tried this out, guys. What I'm going to share with you, we've tried it out in our own way. We have data to back it, all right, evidence. So let's say there are 3 students, okay? You have student A, and student A makes sure that all SC are incorrect, okay? However, all the rest, that is the CR and RC, are correct, okay? And student B does the same, but with all CR incorrect, but all the SC and RC correct, okay? And then you have student C, who makes sure that all RC questions are not done correctly, and the others, that is the CR and SCR, correct. So if you really look at it in terms of distribution, mostly they are just, each of the students is ensuring that one area is totally kept incorrect, all right? So now, can you tell me their scores will be same or different or close to each other or vastly different, guys? Can you tell me what their scores be like? You can just give me your answers in the chat box. I'm going to follow it up. Yes? Let me have your feedback on this. What do you think will be the scores of these students like in terms of relative scores? Utkal says student C will score the least. Shubham also says the same. So Anshul says he's not going to be able to tell. No means their scores won't be similar to each other, I guess. That's what you're saying, Anshul, right? Simran says the scores will be different. Anshul says student C will score the least. Mukul says V34 for each. Liliana says different scores, not much, but not much different. I think that's what I think Liliana means. Now let's see. So here's what their scores would be like. Now, a 4-point difference on a verbal score is a huge difference to your overall score, guys. Okay, remember that. It might not seem much, but it is going to be huge. So you can see how important RC is. Okay, the score of student C is less than score of student A and B. All right, which means the score of RC, getting RCs wrong affects your overall score more, because RCs come consecutively, and if you get them wrong, it will heavily impact your score. So guys, that's how important RCs are, all right? And therefore, you have to make sure that you take RCs seriously, and you have a strategy ready to attack RCs, guys. Most of the time, students think that, okay, let's just solve some OG questions, I'm going to solve as many OG RCs I can, and that's going to be my preparation. It doesn't work like that. In my experience, I have seen guys, I've seen students solve hundreds of RCs and still be nowhere. So if you are among one of them, your RC scores, your RC performance has reached a plateau, it's not budging, then you need to make sure you do something different, guys. Okay, you need to make sure that you do something differently. So today we are going to talk about what you can do to make sure that your RC improves, and not just improves by 2-3 points, but heavily. My students, those of whom have scored with a 720 and above, and whatever talks I have had with them, they have always come back with the saying that had they not employed the involved and evolved reading, had they not worked it out, had they not practiced it and used it on the exam, they probably would not have reached where they have. All right, and it's not just reading the involved and evolved reading, you just read like that, the RC passages. It's not that. The same methodology of reading is inculcated when you're looking at the RC question, the SC questions and the CR questions. So at GMAT Whiz, the way we teach you to read, not just one sentence, 2 sentences, but the entire passage, it starts with the SC course, and it kind of culminates into the RC course as involved and evolved reading. All right, guys, so I've said a lot about it. Now, let me ask you another very interesting question. What is it about RCs that scares you most? I mean, or you find most difficult, or something that is the most problematic aspect of RCs? You can share your views with me, guys. Each of you would probably have your own thoughts about it, that RC is difficult because of this, because of that, because of this. This is something that, troubles me in RC. So I would like to hear from you. Okay, so Utkal says the difficulty is getting lost in the passage. Shubham says depth. So I'm guessing, Shubham, the depth of the passage kind of is a problem. Utkal also says complex structures sometimes. Well, Utkal, one small quick tip here. Before you move to RCs, if you have developed understanding the structures during the CR preparation, you won't have that problem. I'm going to talk about how to understand the structure in RC questions with the help of a simple example, Utkal. So just hold on to that. Hello, Adene. So Adene says that, I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly, Adine or Aden, says that concentration is a problem. Yes, I think that I can understand. Reading a long body of text can kind of test your concentration skills. Vishakha says finding the related area to the question. So Vishakha, that actually never works. If you are not reading the passage in a certain manner, your brain is not likely to remember which portion is discussing what. You try to concentrate on the what, all right, but your brain is not able to map it correctly because you haven't added the why to the what. Don't be puzzled. I'm going to discuss all this. Mayank says not being able to understand the passage to the full. Yes, Mayank, that's a very apt observation. Wasim says primary purpose troubles him a lot. So Wasim, in the next webinar that we have on RC, that is on 10th, we are going to specifically talk about identifying the primary purpose. But then today's webinar is also going to help you how to derive the primary purpose. Anshul says sometimes we don't get important points in long paragraphs. Yes, Anshul, it's very difficult to decide what is important in a passage and what is not, right? Then Wasim also says inference questions. Sanhithi says inferences from passages, especially long passages. Shruti says time taking and under pressure you select the wrong choice. Absolutely, Shruti. You're welcome, Utkal. Julia says to infer the ideas expressed in the passage. Yes, Julia. Inferring or reading between the lines, as I call it, is difficult if you don't read the lines. If you're not reading the lines carefully, you can't read between the lines. Aryan says suitable heading of the passage. Well, as far as GMAT passages are concerned, I haven't really come across too many questions. In fact, very, very few which ask you to provide a suitable heading of the passage. But I'm guessing suitable heading of the passage, you mean the primary purpose of the passage, because usually the suitable heading depends on the primary purpose. Yes, Wasim, trap answers is another thing. So today when we're going to discuss choices, answer choices on different passages that we solved today, I'm going to point out some of the traps which we have dealt in detail in our course. Rutu says the depth of the passage, inability to understand the passage because it is complex. Aniruddha says he does not understand the structure. So Aniruddha, as I told Utkal earlier, I'm going to discuss about how to understand the structure. Okay, Bhavuk says concentration, overall understanding. Vishaka says also forgetting what I did. Yes, Vishaka, recall is a very big problem a lot of times, especially because you're under pressure in the exam. So, and Wasim is saying how to take effective notes. Well, Wasim, if you're just beginning your practice, you can take notes, but ultimately what I have observed in my students is even if they take notes, they don't refer to it when they're answering the question. So I'm not sure whether note taking is a very wise policy overall. It takes time. It takes away your attention when you're reading and again you're breaking away to take down notes. It's taking away your attention from the continuity of the passage. However, there is this thing that if you're just beginning your practice, writing down the summary of a paragraph might be a good idea. All right. So that's that. Rutu says determining the theme of the passage. Okay. So I think most of you have, kind of pointed out some factors which are common factors. Let me just discuss with you quickly this, and I've clubbed them all together. As I told you, in my experience, I've seen how students suffer from RCs, and how they just keep suffering because they get lots of different advice that they read the passage like this, start reading like this, scan and do this and do that, and it doesn't work. So this involved and evolved reading is the result of a lot of soul searching, a lot of understanding the pain points of students, and it works, guys. It has really worked. So here are some of the common fear factors in one way or the other. You guys have told me that, if you come up, I have heard students tell me that, I'm okay with the science passages, but when it comes to humanities, I'm lost. And some say that they are okay with the humanities and they are lost in the science passages. As you were saying, some of you, that you are not able to remember. I think Vishaka was saying that. So poor recall is also another fear factor, that you read the passage and constantly are trying to remember things because you feel when you go to the questions, you won't be able to remember what you have read. And as again, some of you pointed out that under the pressure, you mark the incorrect choice, which is perhaps a closed choice. And time, of course, that is always there. The clock is always ticking. What happens, because you think this about the passage. So you think that these are some of the problem areas, and thinking that these are the problem areas about which you can't do anything, you create a mental block in your mind. Setting up the mental block is the first negative thing that you do, guys. It's counterproductive. It actually hurts you more than it helps. And it's very important to understand that an RC passage can be solved much like an SC question, much like a CR question. All right. And I'm going to discuss that today. So just be patient. In the meantime, I'm sure you have read a lot of discussions on different forums, and your peers and seniors and lots of people would have given you advice, and you would be looking at some of these ways of solving the passage, you know. I'm sure you have. Say, for example, some of you might be just quickly scanning and skimming through the passage, all right, and telling yourself that I'm going to come back for the answer when I'm answering the questions, okay? So you just run through the passage, you don't really read it in detail. Or maybe you read the first and the last line of the passage properly, and you just quickly hurry through the rest of the passage. Or maybe you concentrate on the first and last lines of each paragraph, and then you skim through the rest of the passage. Or maybe you read the question and then search for the answers and so on. All right. So which one of you, I mean, just would want to know that how you guys solve your passages currently. You know, you can just give me your answer. I mean, you can treat this 4 methods as A, B, C, D. Let me bring up a poll if I can. I think I have a, okay, never mind. So I'm going to start a poll, guys. Never mind, there are 5 choices, A, B, C, D, E. You just mark A, B, C, D. All right. Let me know which of these methods you follow. So Shubham says scan and skim is a trap in itself. Anant, if you're having, let me just answer Anant's problem. Anant, if you can't see the audio or video, just please re-log in. Please rejoin. Maybe it will get better, some glitch, because the others are able to see, it seems. All right. So let me see the answers. Okay. So what I can see is more than 50%. No, the polls are still moving. Okay. Let me just share the results of the polls with you. So I'm just going to end the polls, guys. Treat the 4 methods given on the screen as A, B, C, D. Ignore E. There is no E. And just tell me which of these methods, and be honest. Let's be honest. Let's help each other. So Utkal says that the first line of each paragraph gives the idea, the rest explains. It does, Utkal, but in my experience, I've understood that GMAT passages, some of the passages, the first line is important, but it's not a giveaway. Okay, so Vishakha says she reads the entire passage thoroughly. Then I wonder, Vishakha, why you're not able to recall what you have read, but you still get stuck. So today, let's see if we can solve your problem, Vishakha. I sincerely hope so. So let me share the poll results with you guys. Over 54% of you, okay, believe, follow the first approach. That is, you quickly skim and scan through the passage. You quickly move through the passage, and you come back to the passage again and again when you're answering questions, okay? Which means you're basically reading the passage more than once, multiple times, okay? Those of you who are following the first approach. None of you really follow the second approach. About 22% of you kind of follow the third approach. 18% of you follow other approaches. That is, like, you search for the answers. So, well, and I'm sure although different people follow different approaches, none of you might be finding it working for you all the time. Like, I don't think any of these approaches would be helping you consistently perform well. You might sometimes do well, sometimes you may not do well, but you'll never get a consistent result on these approaches, simply because they are never going to solve your problem. Instead, what will happen is you will be throwing away valuable time. Accuracy will often be compromised. And if you do not, what happens if you are reading a passage and you answered the questions and you were not confident when you were answering those questions? That lack of confidence can hamper your performance later on in the exam, when you're solving your SC and CR questions as well. And all this happens because of one simple reason: lack of precise understanding of the passage. I think all of you know this. All of you know that if you don't have a proper understanding of the passage, you are going to face problems, but you don't know what to do about it, because you're scared that there is this time thing, and what else can we do except but read the passages, okay? So we're going to talk about today what we can do. all right, how we can make sure that this precise understanding can be obtained, guys, all right. And for the moment, I want you to keep your questions about time management to yourself. I'm going to discuss that down the line, but not right now. Right now, let's just talk about the method, guys. If you're really interested, if you really want to improve your scores, sincerely, just trust me and listen to what I have to say. Try it out and then you tell me. Then you can always get back to me. Here is what you're going to do. I'm going to, there is this very short passage, I should call it. There are 2 paragraphs to it and this one question. I'm going to give you 3 minutes, all right, to solve this. Please apply whatever methods you're applying currently, because I want you to compare. So currently, whichever way you solve these questions, the RC questions, I want you to use that methodology and solve this one question. Your time starts now. I'm just going to mute myself and bring up the polls, guys. Don't worry, Aniruddha, if it just got visible. I don't know, it must be some technical glitch. So I'm going to bring up the passage again, guys. All right, just hold on to that. So I'm just going to end the polls. Here it goes. Now I've got the answers are divided mostly between A, B, and choice E. 44% of you believe the correct answer is A, and 52% of you believe the correct answer is B. You can see how close that is. All right, 44% A, 52% B, 4% E. Can you see how difficult this question was? Because you guys, there are around 75 plus of you here, and 50-50, almost 50-50 of you believe it's A or B. I'm going to show you what difference involved and evolved reading could make to this passage. All right. But before that, I'm going to talk to you about involved and evolved reading. And as some of you were saying earlier that you're not able to understand the structure, okay, we're going to talk about how to relate back and read, how to use involved and evolved reading to identify the structure, much like you do in your CR questions. Okay. All right, guys. So before that, let me just ask you a small question. I think some of you might be facing technical glitches, guys. Are you able to see the screen and hear me both clearly? So on the screen, you should be seeing this 2 paragraphs and 1 question. So if you're able to see the screen and hear me clearly, then just answer a yes on the question. And in case you're not able to see the screen but hear me, I think you need to rejoin, guys. Could be some technical glitch. All right. All right. So I can see that polls are 100% here. All right. So let me now, I'm going to come back to this passage, guys. Hold on to that thought. I'm going to come back. There's another question to this passage and then we have another passage to solve. But before that, let me also ask you guys, how did you find this passage? Like, did you find it easy, difficult, or did you, like, you know, when you started reading it, were you, my God, what is this passage about and stuff like that? So did you think the passage was very difficult? Because, you know, sometimes people think that, okay, if the passage is very difficult, then only it is of a difficult level. However, it's not always necessary that you get a passage which is very difficult. Sometimes it might be deceptively easy. Abhi found it difficult. Bhavuk says easy language but tricky choices. Suman cannot see the screen. Suman, you have to rejoin. Everybody else can see. So Sahithi says it's a medium. Shubham says it's complex. It is, Shubham. Good. Utsav says medium difficulty. Sagar says would have got it wrong if I wasn't familiar with empirical. Well, Sagar, usually it's never the case that one word would make your answer choice go wrong. Like GMAT doesn't kind of put you in a situation where if you don't know the meaning of one word, you'll get it wrong. If you look at the context, I'll explain to you the context also. You would have got the meaning of empirical also. Vishaka says it's a medium level. Simran found it easy. Jen found it medium. So most of you found it medium. Julia says, again, passage was not difficult, but the solution was challenging. Yes, Julia. So that's another way of making the passage difficult. All right. Wasim says it's an abstract passage. Aryan says it's medium. Yes, Shubham, a lot of jargon is used here, but each of the jargons can be resolved by referring to the context. So in GMAT Wiz, we have this small lesson where we teach you how to derive the meaning of a word from the context. You know, you don't know the meaning. Okay, you don't. But GMAT very cleverly provides you context around that word. So if you're careful and alert, you can notice that. All right, so enough. I talk a lot, I think, sometimes. Sorry, guys. So I'm sure, again, as I've already got some feedback from you, some of you might have been thrown away by that jargon, as Shubham was saying, induction, deduction, generalization. You know, it puts you in a tizzy. You already start forming some mental blocks in your mind. Oh my God, what is this passage about? It's got all these words and I'm not sure what they mean. God only will help me. Let me quickly go through this passage. You start forming things in your mind. What you really need to do is tell yourself, okay, fine, it is English. I'm going to give an exam. I know I have a command of English. I'm able to solve SC questions. I'm able to solve CR questions. Why in the God's name would I not be able to solve RC questions just because there are a few words here which I don't know? So keep a cool head, and the approach that we're going to discuss, use that approach to make sure that you are able to strike gold. Okay? So even if you derive a high level understanding, but a precise understanding, that will help you guys. Okay. So here it is, involved and evolved reading. And it's very simple actually. Something which is so simple that people don't do it. You know, just because people think that, oh, it's such a simple strategy, how can it work? There must be some complex, some rocket science to it. No, guys, it's not that. Okay. And we teach you to read in this manner right from the beginning, right from when you start your SC course and down through the CR portion and then into RC. So I'm going to talk to you what we do here. Involve means to really involve yourself. You know, like, how do you involve yourself in a conversation with a group of people? You participate, right? You participate. You ask questions. You talk to each other. You reply to somebody's ideas. You question somebody's ideas. That is how you get involved. And at the end of that involvement, you evolve your understanding of the issue. I mean, I don't know how many of you all have participated in group discussions, guys. Okay, so in a group discussion, what happens? A topic is given to you and all of you pull in your ideas, right? All of you put in your viewpoints. All of you get involved in the discussion. Then only the group discussion is supposed to be successful. And then at the end of the group discussion on that particular topic, your understanding should have improved or enhanced or been augmented. All right. So what we do in a passage is quite like that. You know, you involve yourself in a manner so that when you come out of the passage, your understanding of the topic is increased or is improved. Okay, you add to it. So let's say if I'm reading a passage on quantum tunneling and I don't have the idea of my life, what it is about, after reading that passage, even though I'm not a science student, I should be able to have gained some more understanding about quantum tunneling. Okay, now enough about it. So here you need to think like the author. Okay, those of you who are saying that you're not able to understand the structure, think like the author. Ask yourself, why is the author putting this sentence after sentence A? Why is the author putting sentence C after sentence B? There must be a purpose. Why has he put A, B, C in that particular order? So we're going to do that. I'm going to demonstrate that to you guys. But on a very short, in a very crisp way, involved reading means you think like the author. You put yourself in the author's shoe and you try to understand what the author is, what point the author is trying to get across. You know, for this, what do you need to do? Never read a 35-word long sentence in one flow, guys. It will never work. However good you might be in English or your verbal proficiency, however good you are, you know, you have to allow your brain the time to assimilate the information. Okay, so never read that long convoluted sentence, that dense sentence in one shot. High chances you'll read it once, not understand much of it, come back, reread it, have a 20% understanding, again come back and again reread it and have a 50% understanding. No, you're wasting time and you're having a disjointed understanding. So break sentences into small parts. We teach you this right from the beginning, as I said, when we teach you how to read sentences in sentence correction modules. You break your sentence into small pieces. We tell you where to break. And you understand the meaning of that small portion first. Okay? Then you move to the next segment where you again break and understand the meaning. So for the subsequent sentence, for the entire sentence, you break the sentence into small parts. You derive the meaning of that small part, move to the next part, understand that meaning, and then add it to the meaning of the first part. So you do this for the sentence itself, single sentence. Then for the subsequent sentences, you do the same thing. You break the sentence and read. But what you also additionally do is you keep relating back to the previous sentence to understand the structure. All right. So for example, if the first sentence was the author's, let's say, point of view, then the second sentence might be a supporting reason. The third sentence might be another supporting reason. All right. The fourth sentence could be a further conclusion that the author is driving. So you will get to understand this only when you keep relating back the meaning of one sentence to the other sentence, asking yourself, why is the author stating this here? What is the purpose of putting it here? Okay. I'm going to demonstrate that to you in a while. And for understanding the relationship between sentences, transition words and conjunctions are really helpful. Again, we teach you how to utilize the transition words, words like however and because and although and furthermore and moreover, how it helps you to relate meaning. Okay, we also teach you that. After you've done this for each of the sentences and groups of sentences for the paragraph, what you do is you summarize the paragraph. I'm going to do all of this today and show you. So you summarize each para, and at the end of the reading the entire passage, you would have some 2-3 para summaries which you can kind of translate into the main point. All right. So more about that later. Now I'm going to highlight to you how to do this part with the help of a very simple example. The example I'm going to give you is simple. Okay, deliberately kept simple so that you understand. But remember, the same thing, the same process can be used for even more complex structures. Okay, so I want you to read these 2 sentences. Okay, I just give you about 20 seconds, 20-30 seconds to read it quickly. All right, now here's how I would read it. But before that, let me ask you, when you read the second sentence, okay, why do you think the author has given the second sentence here? Can you tell me? Guys, in the chat boxes, can you tell me quickly, without taking too much time? I'm sorry, Utkal, to hear the weather's bad. I hope you guys can hear me clearly, guys. Okay, so Shrey says cause, Utkal says correlation, Nipun says probable reason of decline in consumption, Shubham says to support the first sentence, yes, Aditya says reason or cause, Gaurav says establish causation, Sagar says to relate, Utsav says reason for the, absolutely. So most of you have got that. Okay, but you will get this. Now what happens when you're reading the passages, you don't really stop to add it together, you try to add it when you go to the question, and some question is going to ask you, okay, what was the primary purpose of this sentence, or what was the function of this last sentence of the paragraph? Then you go back to the paragraph and you try to relate. It doesn't work, guys. It doesn't quite cut like that. All right, your relationship, your flow of ideas should be done on spot. Okay, so when you are reading these 2 sentences together, at that time, at the end of the second sentence itself, you should ask yourself, what is the purpose of the author here? Why is he saying this? Probably because of this. And then you read the next sentence and so on. Okay, so I'm going to quickly read this to show you, just to kind of consolidate most of you were correct. So this is how I would read when we talk about break and read. In the last decades, I would tell myself, okay, we're talking about the last 10 years, something about the last 10 years. There has been a significant decrease in coffee consumption. Now, when we say in the last decade, in the SC course, we have already been taught that in the last decade includes now. So this decrease in coffee consumption is still happening, okay? So what has happened in the last 10 years is people have significantly reduced their coffee intake. All right, good. So I've read this first sentence, fine. This sentence is a fact, nothing more than that. During the same time, so then I tell myself, okay, so in the same last 10 years, something else must have happened, and the author is probably trying to tell us two things happening simultaneously. Perhaps they have a relationship, they don't have. This is all going on in my mind at the same time, automatically. During the same time, there has been increasing publicity. Okay, so in the last 10 years, along with the decrease in coffee consumption, there has been more and more publicity or awareness about the adverse long-term effects. Adverse means negative long-term effects on health of the caffeine in coffee. So a lot of things are packed into this sentence. It's a simple sentence, guys, but the same thing you can do for a difficult sentence. So this sentence is telling us there is caffeine in coffee. Caffeine is unhealthy, and there has been a lot of awareness recently about how unhealthy caffeine in coffee is. And then I ask myself, why is the author stating this sentence? And immediately what comes to my mind is, the only reason I can see is he's talking about decreasing coffee consumption. So probably he is linking this increased awareness to as a cause to the coffee consumption. He's, as you guys have rightly pointed out, he's drawing a correlation. How difficult was that? But what happens is you don't do it on spot. Think about it. This is a simple sentence and it was easy. But what if it's not a simple sentence and you don't ask that question? Would you be able to relate it later on? Perhaps not. Okay. Now imagine this sentence. Okay. After the second sentence. The moment you have this sentence, what does this sentence say? However, so that's a contradictory transition word. And I know that, okay, whatever I thought about the first two sentences is now going to change a bit. There's going to be something different. There has been an increase in the consumption of tea. Okay, so decrease in the consumption of coffee, increased publicity about negativity in coffee. Then we have an increase in consumption of tea also. Okay, which also contains similar quantities of caffeine. All right, so here, what is the purpose of this sentence now, guys? Can you tell me? What is the purpose of the third sentence? So the second sentence was to support the first, to kind of give the cause of the decrease. What is this third sentence doing, guys? Sorry. So remember, we are trying to relate back. Now, the moment you read the third sentence, your understanding of the relationship of the first two sentences changes a bit, isn't it? Yes, guys? Let me see. Sorry, I can't. Yeah. Okay, so let me see. Utkal says to say the information. So which information is not right? See, nowhere does the author say that any particular information is incorrect. Matthew says contrasting the second sentence. Yes, contrasting why? To suggest what? So Gaurav is saying perhaps increasing publicity has no impact on reduced caffeine consumption. Yes, very good, Gaurav. Simran says to contradict the statement made earlier about caffeine. Well, yes, as Gaurav pointed out, to kind of dilute the effect of adverse publicity. All right, that is the purpose of the third sentence. All right, as Rohan says, disproving or contradicting the second statement. Good. So now if you're looking at, when you read the second sentence, you realize the reason for decrease may not be publicity, but perhaps something else. See how your understanding changes if you are keeping on relating sentences. Now imagine that this sentence is not there, guys. Okay. Now imagine this sentence is not there. Instead, you have this sentence. Now, can you tell me what is the purpose of the third statement? Purpose of third statement, guys, quickly. So Shobit says publicity was about caffeine in coffee and not just caffeine. So Shobit, the second statement says it was about caffeine, okay? Adverse effects on health of the caffeine in coffee. All right. So caffeine definitely is unhealthy, and coffee, the caffeine found in coffee. Now the third statement was telling you that the quantity of caffeine was similar, right? Therefore, perhaps the author was trying to suggest that, look, you had a similar kind of beverage, but the consumption of that beverage did not go down. So had it only been the increased publicity, then that beverage would also have suffered. Yes, Gaurav. So let me see further. So you guys have now understood it clearly. Okay. Further spreading, misleading, shift in language says Vihar. Gaurav says reason for decrease may be publicity. Yes. The third statement, which is on the screen now, actually suggests that publicity probably was the reason behind the decrease in the consumption of coffee, because another caffeine containing beverage has also seen a fall in consumption. So guys, this is a very simple example of how to relate back. You're not reading sentences in isolation. You are evolving your understanding of the passage, and with adding more and more sentences to the same, in the same context, you have to build why the author is saying something. So this entire context here, the author is trying to build a case for why there was a decrease in coffee consumption, or why there was what was a reason or what was not a reason, and so on and so forth. Right? Is this clear, guys? So some of you who were talking about structures, all right, is this helpful? This relating back and reading, did this help, guys? Is this clear to you? This is what you need to do for every sentence that you read. Understand what it means. Usually what happens is, without a complete understanding, now these were very small, short sentences, you know, so you might be telling yourself, how difficult can it be? But imagine if you have a 40-word long sentence, and if you don't break it and read it, and if you don't relate it, what kind of trouble you're going to land yourself in. Now, the passage that we had earlier on, okay, let's go back to that. This was the first paragraph, right? Now, I'm going to, all of you have read it, all of you have marked the answer choice. We remember that the question, 50% of you marked A, 50% of you almost marked B. I'm going to read this passage and derive a para summary. I'll show you how to derive the para summary, how to read in an involved and evolved manner. And then I want each of you guys to compare your reading, your understanding with the understanding that I am deriving. If it matches, you know, up to at least 90%, well and good. If it doesn't, all right, even if you've had a slight deviation, that deviation could cost you one question. All right, so let me get started. I want all of you to be as attentive as possible, guys. And this methodology is really going to change your RC performance. That much I can promise. All right. Well, let me quickly start. To put things simply, all right, so right in my mind that a bulb goes off, the author is going to simplify something for me. All right, what is the author going to simplify? Let's see. Induction, and again, so now if I know the meaning of induction, good. What if I don't? What do? I just tell myself it's a noun. Any TION word is a noun, guys, just for your knowledge, any word. So there is something called induction, which emphasizes the individual. Okay, so we have this sentence. What does it mean? Induction is something that lays stress on or gives kind of importance on the individual. I still don't understand what it means, so I'm going to wait for the context to build. Whereas, and since this is one of those transition words, one of those words which helps me to build context, I understand now the author is bringing up a contrast between something. So to put things simply, in simple words, induction stresses on the individual, the single, all right? On the other hand, there is something called deduction. It begins with generalization. Now, how do I understand this context? So a generalization is about the mass, isn't it? Lots. but individual means one. So induction is something which is related to individual. Deduction is something which is related to the general, the mass. All right, this is what I tell myself if I don't know the meaning of induction and deduction. Okay, all right. And I'm not going to, I don't panic. I don't try to rush into reading the rest of it. I tell myself, okay, let me tread a little slowly. You know, guys, I'm sure you've tasted different, new dishes as one time or the other. So what do when there's a new dish in front of you? Do you just dig in the spoon, fill it to the brim and push it in your mouth and quickly gobble it up? No, no. If it's a new dish and you don't recognize the taste, you take a small spoonful, you put it in your mouth, you kind of roll it on your tongue, you take some time for the taste to be absorbed. If you like it, you go ahead further. If you don't, you leave it. Here you don't have the option of leaving it, guys. Okay, don't leave it. Okay, make sure that you acquire a taste. Anyways, let's move forward. So here we are talking about something called induction, something called deduction, and there is a contrast being brought out between the two. One deals with the masses, one deals with the individual. Let's move forward. Okay, science, and you might be thinking this takes a lot of time, but remember, as I said, put the question about time on hold. I'm going to answer it. All this, your brain will do very, very quickly. Okay, your neurons will be activated if you're involved. They'll work very quickly. But you need to activate your eyes, engage with what the text. Let me move further. Science largely began. Okay, now suddenly from induction and deduction, we're talking about science, and my brain starts telling me, okay, so this induction and deduction could be something which is related to science. I don't know how, but let me see. Science largely began, so I'm talking about the beginnings of science, origins of science, with a focus on deductions. Okay, so science was mostly dealing with the masses, huge numbers, all right? So it began with a focus on deduction, all right? And I'm asking myself, why is the author talking about how science began, and why is the author saying first the focus was on deduction? Possibly later on he's going to talk about how the focus shifted, maybe, or maybe later on he's going to talk about how science developed later on. I'm telling this myself simultaneously as I'm reading. Science largely began with a focus on deduction. Trying to, so this is a comma plus ing here, and this is modifying the verb began. So the manner in which science began with a focus on deduction is science was trying to find universal laws, and science was hoping to explain as much about the world as possible. So this entire line tells me why science started with deduction. Okay, fine. In the 19th century, now see, we are talking about at the beginning and then down the line. In the 19th century, generalizations. Now, what are generalizations? In other words, I related to deduction, isn't it? This is where we have deduction begins with generalization. So when we are saying in the 19th century, generalizations reached a pinnacle of overuse, we are basically saying deduction reached a pinnacle of overuse. Now, what if I don't know what the word pinnacle means? One, I could do a fill in the blank here. Two, I could simply try to understand the overall meaning. The overall meaning here is generalization reached overuse. Okay. Pinnacle, by the way, means a summit. All right. And here, even if you don't know the meaning of pinnacle, what we can understand is science began by focusing on deduction, but gradually perhaps it overused this deduction too much. So the pinnacle translates into the word too much. Pinnacle, by the way, means the peak. All right. So in the 19th century, this deduction reached overuse, particularly for explaining human characteristics. So I can infer that in the 19th century, deduction was being used to talk about human characteristics. It reached it was being overused. All right. So I'm trying to ask myself, why is the author talking about overuse? So author first spoke about starting with the focus on deduction, then talking about how it was overused. Probably the author is now talk about how it kind of faded into, start, become overused, and then probably fade or something like that. I'm telling myself this simultaneously. It may not always be the correct, but I'm telling myself, I'm engaging. While, okay, so here again I have a transition word. While could mean contrast, or it could also mean two things happening simultaneously, while deduction became disfavored. And I'm asking myself, there. So that is why the author was trying to build up all this. He was trying to tell us how initially deduction was favored, but because it was overused, it gradually lost favor because of those missteps. I'm guessing these missteps could only refer to this overuse. Okay. So while deduction lost favor, induction rose to favor. All right. So here comes the difference between induction and deduction. Generalizations stopped being more important or stopped being the focus, although it had been the focus in the beginning, but induction gained favor in science. Probably here I'm inferring because since we're talking about the context of science and induction and deduction. So induction rose to favor. That means induction started being used more and more on the heels of, now if I don't recognize this idiomatic expression, don't worry. What I can infer is induction probably had more quantitative techniques than deduction, and therefore induction kind of gained favor for describing the individual objects of study. All right. Remember, induction was about individuals, therefore induction gained favor here when it came to understanding individual objects of study. So now this, just because I'm explaining it to you, I'm kind of extrapolating my thoughts to you. It might seem that it takes a lot of time. It doesn't, guys. All you need to do is simply relate back sentences, and what you've got is this. Passage introduces two terms, induction and deduction. Induction stresses on the particular or individual or specific. Deduction starts from making generalization, it talks about masses. By the 19th century, too much of generalization had been used. Subsequently, induction gained popularity because of the techniques it used. And if I had to summarize this in a single word, I would say the author talks about two terms, induction and deduction, and shows how the former gained favor over the other. Guys, so those of you who were talking about find it difficult to, yes, on the heels of means supported by or kind of with the help of Pallav. Yes, you're absolutely right. So guys, your views on this involved and evolved reading. Now, how many of y'all, let me ask you this question. How many of y'all had this exact meaning? How many of y'all had the same meaning? Those of you who did not understand it like this, please answer a no. Those of you understood exactly like this, please answer a yes. If your understanding was even 10% different from mine, then it is different. It's not good enough. You might have, see, we've seen how 50% of you have got this question, you have marked A and 50% have marked B, which means that all of you may not have had this kind of understanding. And you need this kind of understanding for 700 plus level passages. I can see a lot of you answering a yes and a no. So the second paragraph of this particular snippet was even more dense. And if you do not have a good understanding of this paragraph, you'll find you're even more lost in the second paragraph. Remember, some of you were saying that, you get lost in the depth. All right, this is exactly why you get lost in the depth, because the starting is not clear. Therefore, if you just move ahead without understanding it clearly, you're going to get even, you are going to get lost in the forest. Absolutely, you're going to get lost in the forest. All right, guys. So I'm going to do the same kind of reading for the second paragraph quickly. And again, in the second paragraph, I'm going to show you what I sometimes do. Some of you, Rutu, I think was asking about, Aden was asking about note making, or Rutu was asking about note making. I'm not sure which one of you, sorry. But I'm going to tell you what kind of notes I do make, if I do make notes at all. Okay, so this is how structure should be understood. All right, now here comes the second paragraph. So the first paragraph, I've already understood that the main point, the author's purpose in the first paragraph was to introduce two terms and show how one term lost favor and the other gained favor. Let's see. Let's start. The problem of induction. Okay, so after talking about how induction gained favor, now the author is talking about problem with induction. So induction also has some problems. All right. The problem of induction is the impossibility of observing every individual case. Okay, what does this sentence really mean? That induction cannot possibly observe every individual case. What does it mean? And I'm telling myself, okay, so if I have, let's say, 100 cases, all right? That means this induction cannot observe all the 100 individual cases. This is what I'm telling myself. Okay. In other words, so I'm telling myself, okay, here the author is going to tell me more about what he means by impossibility. This is the problem. I'm focusing on this. Impossibility of observing every individual case. Why is this a problem of induction? Probably the author is going to talk about that now. In other words, there is always uncertainty, okay, doubt about what hasn't been directly observed, and it is impossible to observe everything. Now, this line tells me two very important aspects. One, it says you cannot observe everything. That means I'm telling myself, okay, by using induction, you cannot observe all 100 cases. And what does the first point mean? There is always uncertainty about what hasn't been observed. That means, let's say, out of this 100 cases, if 70 cases can be observed and 30 cases cannot be observed, then there will always be uncertainty about these 30 cases. That is what this line is telling me. So I kind of do some kind of diagrammatic work in my brain or on the paper for things like this, just to have things very clear in my mind. Because see, my experience has told me there could be lots of twisted questions here, and if I don't understand this passage here and here now, later on when I come back, my understanding will be even more disjointed. So right now I'm understanding how this process works. Okay. So therefore, because there is always going to be this doubt about the remaining unobserved cases, to help fill the gaps between observations. Okay, that means for filling the gap, these 30 non-observed cases have left. What is done? We make generalizations. Okay, so this is the problem. This is the problem actually, isn't it? That you cannot observe everything. Therefore, for the things that you cannot observe, you have to make generalization. And the generalization is based on what? That are the generalizations that are based on what has been observed so far, which means these 30 cases, okay, generalizations are made about these 30 cases on the basis of these 70 cases. So 70 cases were observed using induction, but for the 30 cases, for filling up that gap about those 30 cases, what was used? The observation of the 70 cases. So generalizations were drawn from the 70 cases to make up for the gap. That means you have to make some sort of generalization in order to fill that gap. All right. So that's the problem I'm telling myself, that ultimately you have to use generalizations even in the process of induction, because you cannot observe everything and there will always be doubt about what you cannot have, what you haven't observed. So to fill that gap, you are basically drawing generalizations about things that you have observed. Let's read further. In modern science, okay, so we are talking about today's world, these generalizations, which generalizations? The generalizations that are made based on what has been observed so far, all right? Or predictive guides take the form of scientific models, all right? So these generalizations make scientific models, or in other words, scientific models are made by making generalizations on the observed cases. That means in the observed cases, the author must be finding something common and drawing a generalization about that, and that is forming a scientific model. All right, there are different types of, so I'm thinking about it here, the author is trying to tell me about the problem of induction, and he's saying the problem of induction is you cannot observe everything, so you have to use generalization. However, these generalizations lead to certain models. Let's see what further. There are different types of models, okay? But one of the most popular is the empirical model. I remember one of you saying that you did not understand the meaning of empirical. Let's say I don't know the meaning of empirical, okay? But I just know that it is one type of model. Now see, if you're looking forward for the context, it's there. Defining a model as empirical emphasizes. So this is telling you, when we call a model empirical model, what does it mean? It means it emphasizes the fact that it is built from or calibrated on observed data. That means if you call something empirical, this empirical model is built on observed data. So empirical, if I know the meaning, I know it is something which occurs out of experimentation and data observed from experimentation. But here empirical, it's telling you it means something that is built on the basis of observed data. That is empirical model. All right. So empirical model is the most popular scientific model, but I don't know what this model is used for. All right. It's a model that is there in modern science. And this model is made on the basis of generalization through the process of induction. Let's see. And remember, generalization is deduction, by the way. This generalization is basically deduction, isn't it? So in the process of induction, you are using an element of deduction. This is how you have to tell yourself. The purpose of this empirical model is to then help the researcher understand system dynamics and make predictions. Okay, so this is the purpose, the end purpose of this empirical model. It is used to understand system dynamics and make predictions about that system, whatever is going to take place. But, okay, so I have then here, I have but here. The application of the model to unknown situations is deduction. So application of the model here, the application of the model is a generalization, isn't it? You are applying it to a general situation, to unknown situations, is known as deduction. So basically the development of the model is done through induction, but the application of the model is basically deduction. So I'm telling myself, all right, the paragraph talks about the problem with induction. It cannot really observe each and every case. All right, it cannot observe each and every case. However, I'm inferring that conclusion. So this is my inference here. You cannot observe each and every case, but you have to draw conclusions about the particular area of study, even if all cases are not considered. Thus, there is always a feeling of uncertainty about drawing conclusions without studying such left out cases. So to cover the gap left by unstudied cases, generalizations must be drawn, and these generalizations produce models that are applied to make deductions. So if I have to summarize in a single line, I'm saying the paragraph talks about the problem with the process of induction and how induction helps develop generalized predictive models used for deduction. So if I put my para summaries together, the flow of the passage is, the structure is something like this. The author introduces two terms or processes, how one has gained favor over the other. Then the author describes the process of induction and talks about its problems and its predictive models for deduction. All right, clear? So guys, again, to ask you this question, this was a more difficult paragraph. All right. How many of you all understood it actually like this? And I am pretty much sure, I mean, let's be very frank with ourselves. How many of you all actually understood it like this? How many of you all understood this paragraph exactly like this? Even slight deviations might have cost you the answer, because I know 50% of you got it right, 50% of you got it wrong. So I don't think many of you all would have got this understanding, guys. All right. And again, it is not for me to really know or judge you. You need to tell yourself that I'm not doing something right. And that is why probably I'm stuck with my score. All right. And if you're stuck with your score, guys, start reading your passages with more interest, more involvement. Ask questions. Preempt what the author is saying. Think what the author might be trying to tell you. You know, kind of, it's like a conversation with the author. And if you really engage, you will find things get easier. All right, great, guys. So I can see a lot of you actually did not write this understanding. And I'm sure that with this kind of reading, you will begin to be able to solve even the most difficult passages, guys. Now for the question that we had. So now, as I said earlier, 44% of you marked A. 44% of you marked A. 54% of you, I think, had marked this, and there was a 4% or 2% who had marked E. So it's really between A and B. Now, if I take up the choices one by one. A says, so I have to read my choice A along with this. This is a half sentence. According to the passage, scientific models. Now, if I do a little bit of quick pre-thinking here, scientific models are these guides which are made with the help of generalizations, which are made with the help of induction. This is what I'm telling myself very, very quickly in terms of a very brief thinking. And then I go to choice A. So scientific models are developed, okay? Yes, they are developed, definitely. So this part is fine. On the basis of commonality. Now, scientific models are built on the basis of generalization, right? That we know. Okay. Sorry, 1 second. Right. I'm going to talk about this later. Wait. So scientific models are developed on the basis of commonality, and I'm telling myself commonality here could be generalizations. All right. And how are these generalizations made? So commonality observed in multiple individual instances. And I recall to myself what I thought earlier. There are 100 cases. Out of this, 70 are observed, 30 are not observed. And on the basis of this 70, generalizations are made about this 30. And I'm telling myself A could be correct. In fact, look at what is given. All right. Defining a model as empirical emphasizes the fact that it is built from observed data. So the starting point is data is collected, which is often used to build models. Okay. And this data is collected on the basis of observation that we make. So the starting point is observation. Okay. Generalization would likely be based on common factors in the observation. All right. And that is how the generalization would become general principles or models to be used as guides for predictions. So A is correct. 44% of you got it right. Now, what most of you don't do, and I might be wrong here, guys. I think a lot of you would definitely be looking at the solutions of these answer choices if you're getting it wrong. But how many of y'all really check to see whether your reasoning was correct for a correct question? Let's say you got this right. Do you ever think to yourself, did I get it right for the right reason? Let me analyze. I might have actually got it right more as a hit rather than an actual proper reasoning. And this kind of analysis, soul searching, will really help in your practice, not just solving hundreds of passages. It's always quality over quantity, guys. Anyway, so coming back to my point here, A is the correct answer. And if you've got it right for the right reasons, good. But if you've got it because you felt it was right, then you might, then it's not, it's equivalent to not getting it right. Okay. Now let's see where B went wrong. So you would have seen I actually read my answer choice also in a very deliberative, involved and evolved manner. I break it into pieces and I understand which piece is correct, which piece is not correct. Okay. I'm going to answer your questions. If you have questions, just hold on to that. Let me finish discussing this. B says, scientific models are built, okay, are developed, are built on the basis of generalizations. So far, it's correct. Absolutely. That are the result of prediction. Now, is the generalization the result of prediction or is the generalization leading to the prediction, guys? Look at the passage. Okay. Is this generalization the result of predictions which have come true? Now, let's go back to the passage. In modern science, these predictive guides take the form of scientific models, we are saying. All right. And so generalization is not the result of prediction, guys. Generalization helps you form models, okay? And these models help you to predict. So generalization becomes the model and the model is used for prediction. Generalization leads to predictive guides, okay? So there is a distortion here in this portion. This portion is distortion. So we call this half truth. This is half truth and this is the distortion. Familiar ideas picked from the passage but distorted. All right, and therefore B is incorrect. So those of you who did not have a proper understanding, you just stumbled over things like, okay, there is a deduction here, okay, and there is a generalization somewhere here. All right. And there is a predictive guide over here. Okay. And you somehow just see that B is correct. No, guys. 700 plus level questions, you will get such kind of traps and you will fall over them one after the other. Okay. So my question to those of you who marked B, are you clear why B is not the answer, guys? Okay. Are you clear with why B is not the answer? I think I've put the question wrong. My question is, guys, those of you who marked B, are you clear why B is not correct? Are you clear? Okay, if you have queries, I can see some of you are not clear. If you have any queries about B, please ask. I'll just quickly explain B again. If you see, B says, B basically, if I shorten it, saying that scientific models, okay, are basically generalizations, okay. These generalizations are the result of prediction. The generalization is not a result of prediction, guys. Generalization is not a result of prediction. Generalization helps you to make prediction. So what we have is generalization leads to scientific models. Scientific models help make prediction. So you can see that generalization is not the result of prediction. Okay, clear now? I think that clears things. Great. So I'm going to bring up another question on, I think we don't need to discuss C. So C very clearly, if you see, we can't say that scientific models are completely futile when it comes to understanding human behavior. They're not completely futile. They were used in the earlier part of the century. We don't know enough from the passage to say that these scientific models never undergo any alterations. It's out of scope. A few of you did mark E. Scientific models are foolproof generalizations. We don't know about this part, whether they are foolproof, whether they have any weak areas or not, we don't know. All right. So E cannot be the correct answer. It is out of scope. Here comes another question on the same passage. Now that we have explained the passage so well, I want you to consider this question. You have exactly a minute. Your time starts now. Yes, Utkal, too much jargon. You have to be careful. There are lots of passages like this. All right, Liliana, I have it that you have marked A as your correct answer. The others, please put in the polls. I'll just quickly count 5 and then I'm going to end the polls. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay. Just remember that one part of your involved reading is understanding the passage. And the second part is when you are answering the questions. So you have to do the same kind of analysis for your answer choices bit by bit. Okay. That is the final stage of your RC accuracy. Okay. Let me end the poll now. 33% of you have marked A. 48% of you have marked B, which is the correct answer. So you can clearly see here, having a better understanding of the passage definitely helps. I hope it did help you to answer that question. 14% of you have marked C, 3% of you have marked B. Let's see why A is incorrect, guys. Okay, so this is going to help you from the point of view of identifying traps. So the question is, what is the problem involving the process of induction? Now, if I do a little bit of pre-thinking, shadow thinking, shadow thinking of the answer, I I know that the second paragraph talks about the problem with induction. Okay, the problem with induction here was that ultimately you are having to make generalizations. You need to make generalization. You cannot study every individual case. Therefore, in short, the problem with induction is it has to somewhat resort to deduction. That's the problem. You cannot observe every single data. That's a simple way of putting the problem, but if you look at a very twisted way, then what the author finds problematic with induction is ultimately you are having to make generalizations. Okay, with that thought, I move to the elimination of the answer choices. Okay, so the problem with induction is it fails in its observation of individual cases. Now I stop here. It fails in its observation of individual cases, and I ask myself, impossibility of observing every case, is it the same as, is this and this same? Guys, tell me, all of you. I'm going to ask you a yes and no. Wait. Are these two expressions same, guys? You can answer me in the poll. Just read those two expressions and tell me, is it the same thing? No. Yet 33% of you have marked it, which basically means you're not concentrating. You're just looking at familiar words and things like that. Maybe you concentrated more on the second half of A, which seems more correct, and you did not look at the first half. All right. And this is a very simple trap, a very, very simple trap. Okay. Remember, the test makers know how you are likely to think. You've got to be smarter than them and make sure that your thinking is so refined and precise that you're not going to be fooled. Okay, so these two are not the same. When you say impossible to observe every case, it means you cannot observe all 100 cases, but that doesn't mean that it will fail to observe those 70 cases also. Okay, all right, so A, the first half is definitely incorrect and has to depend on speculative measures to fill the gaps. Now, the word speculative means guesswork. This here again is a very extreme word to use. We do say that to help fill the gaps between observation, we make generalization. But these generalizations are not guesswork. They are based on what has been observed so far. So to call them speculative measures to fill the gaps is a very distorted and extreme way. It's like saying, it's like using a very, very negative term to define an aspect. So A is all in all out. Not the correct answer. It's a distortion. Okay. B is the correct answer, and a lot of you might have been thrown off because it starts with the word advantage, and you tell yourself, okay, I'm supposed to find the problem of induction, not the advantage of something. Don't do that, guys. As I said again, the test makers understand your psychology. They know how you think. You've got to outsmart them by showing that you can also think the way they think. So you always make sure that you read your sentence properly. You don't form a bias towards any choice even before you have eliminated the other options. Okay. So its advantage here will refer to the advantage of induction, because the question was, what is the problem of induction? So it refers to induction. Okay. So induction's advantage is its basis. And what is the basis of induction? Which are the specific observations of individual cases. Yes, this is the advantage, definitely. You are observing individual cases. That is one part of it. But it too, it here refers to induction. Okay, so it has an advantage, but it too has to resort to generalization. It has to make generalizations of some specific cases. And that is the problem here. It cannot observe everything. Therefore, to fill in the gap, it has to make generalizations, and generalizations we know is basically deduction. So B is the correct answer. It is in line with our rethinking. And I hope those of you who got it right, you got it right because the passage was very clear to you, crystal clear to you. All right. So that's nice. 48% of you got it right, and that's like nearly 50% of you got it right. But For me, the concern is, and for you also, the concern should always be, did you get it right for the right reason? Yes, Wasim, fails is a very extreme word, so you must be careful about the different words used on the answer choices. Okay, it shouldn't be only words which make a difference. So let's see. Some of you marked C as an answer also. It cannot draw up a predictive model unless and until. Now we know it draws up a predictive model. So let's see if there is a situation where induction cannot draw up a predictive model unless and until it has observed all individual cases. Guys, from the passage we know that it is not able to analyze all cases. 70 it analyzes, it is able to observe. 30 it is not able to observe, but it fills in the gap with the help of observation, and predictive models are made. So we can't say that it cannot draw up a predictive model if it does not study all cases. It does come up with a predictive model even if it has not studied all cases involved. Okay, it has studied some of the cases, and for the rest of the cases which it could not study, it drew generalizations. So this particular choice is actually giving you some opposite information to the passage, and which is definitely not correct. Its predictive guides are all built on the basis of imprecise observation, distortion, incorrect. It is ultimately used for making general predictions, is basically the function of the process of deduction. It is not the problem of induction, and therefore is not the answer. So that is that, guys. All right. Now to answer your most important questions. Yes, B was opposed to the, so Liliana, I think B, I think the word advantage threw you off, right? Liliana said she thought that B was opposed to the intent of the question. So never read half the question and form a bias. You know, sometimes you get lost that way. Yes, Vihar. So Vihar, C is not about if induction alone is used. Here, the entire process of induction involves generalization. So we cannot segregate that if only induction is used or if only deduction is used. The overall problem with induction is that you have to use generalization. So there's a twist there. Okay, Vihar. If you look at choice C, what is choice C really saying? It cannot draw up a predictive model unless and until it has studied all individual cases. Okay, so this is not the problem. The problem is it cannot study all individual cases, but this part is a distortion. This part is not something that we can infer, guys. All right. We know that it is impossible to observe every case, but we cannot say that unless and until it has studied all cases, it cannot draw up a predictive model. Induction can draw up a predictive model by studying only some of the cases because it takes the help of generalizations, and that is the problem. Because generalizations means you don't have precise data. No? Here it's given that it is impossible, there is always uncertainty about what hasn't been directly observed. Okay, so yeah, it is a trap choice, guys. So when you're reading the answer choice also, you have to divide your sentences into small portions to understand which portion is absolutely true to the passage, like 100% data sufficient. Okay, your passage is backing your answer choice, and which part of the answer choice deviates. It's an aberration, it's a distortion. Clear? So guys, next is to answer your very important question, time. Let me move forward. I do understand the concern is, ma'am, won't this process take a lot of time? It will when you are learning how to do it. Okay, I mean, when you are learning how to drive a car, ride a bicycle, learn how to swim, do you keep looking at your watch to see how many seconds or minutes it takes you to learn how to pedal? No, when you are learning something, it takes time. Okay, so learning this method may seem time consuming, and it probably will be taking more time initially. But with practice, what happens is this process becomes second nature. Like, I mean, honestly, no, all jokes apart, if I go to a restaurant and sit and read the menu, there too, I read like that only. I mean, it's, as I said, it's intuitive. I'm passing, I'm going on the road, and if I'm passing a hoarding and there's a 2 sentences written on the billboard out there, I break it and read it. I contextualize. That's like second nature. So you've got to make something a habit for it to function smoothly. Like now today, those of you who know how to drive or how to swim, you don't even have to think how your hands and legs are coordinated, or how you're coordinating your gear movements and your steering and everything. Right? You do it without really putting in your thought. Same thing here. When you're learning a process, it will take time. So initially, please do not tax yourself. Like, look at the time, but don't time yourself initially. And gradually, you will see automatically the time that you're taking to read the passage, you're saving time when you're answering the choices. All right. So if you read properly, as Vishakha was saying earlier, she doesn't recall what lies where. You'll be able to map the passage, you'll understand the flow of idea, you'll be able to derive the author's point. All in all, you will be able to answer your questions with accuracy, guys. All right. So what I'm going to do is, so you'll have to keep using it. So Adina has a question here. Do you advise reading Economist and other journals to help this process? Reading always helps, Adina, but I have known people who are not avid readers, but who are able to answer RC questions on the GMAT with high accuracy by using this method day in and day out. So if you do read, what happens is you become familiar with information, and that always helps. Whatever anybody might say, familiarity always helps. Yes, Vinod, every word in the option has to be analyzed. But the problem is, you are saying in difficult RC question, you won't know if the question you have got is difficult, isn't it? So you have to have the same strategy for all RC passages. Not wait for a difficult passage to come up. Okay. So what I have now is, I'm going to start sharing with you guys the PDF of a passage, which I want you to solve now. Try to use the involved and evolved reading methodology, guys. So I'm sharing the passage with you now. It's got 3 questions. I'll give you time, enough time, and I want you to push yourself to use this method. Break and read your sentences, relate back the meaning of one sentence to the other, understand the why. Most of you concentrate on trying to understand the what. The what will be there, it's there written in front of you anytime you want to see it. Concentrate on the why. Why is the author saying this? Why is the author saying so? All right. So I'm sharing the PDF with you. I'm going to give you, you guys tell me how much time should I give you for 3 questions and a 3 paragraph. The passage is not very long. Yes, guys, you tell me how much time should I give you. Go ahead. Yes, guys. I'm waiting for your suggestions. Okay, so I've got things like, let's see, 7. It was reflecting late, a little late in reflecting at my end. Sorry, guys. So 7 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 7, 10, 7, 10, 7, 10. Pooja, 5 minutes will not be enough. Trust me on that. I want you to solve those 3 questions as well. Mohit says 10 minutes. So I think 10 minutes wins hands down. It is also going to cover 7 minutes and 5 minutes. So guys, you have, okay, Vinod says 12 minutes. So I'm kind of going to give you those 12 minutes, guys. I want you to try following this involved and evolved method of reading. Okay. You will be successful to some extent, but you will see that it definitely gives you a better alternative to what you're currently using. All right. So your time starts now. You have 12 minutes. Write the answers and keep it with you. I'll bring up the poll one. In the panel, okay, in the panel next to your chat box, you have a files button, okay? So click on that file button you will see I'm sharing a session passage, all right? So you can download that session passage. It's a PDF format, and you can solve the passage. Can you guys see that? Vishakha, Nitin, others, everybody? Aryan, yes, I will bring up the poll, but I have given everybody 10 to 12 minutes, and there are still 4 minutes to go. So if you want, I can, we should wait a few more minutes. I think others are still solving, all right? So I can see Nitin and Shubham, Mukul, Aryan, Philippe are ready, but I guess the others are still doing it. So guys, please be a little bit. This is the last minute, guys. So buck up. I'm just going to bring up the polls one by one. So those of you who've already finished answering, here's the poll for the first question. Another 30 seconds to go for those of you who are still solving. All right, guys, so your time's up. Please answer, please fill in the poll for the first question. It's there on your screens. Those of you who cannot see the poll for any reason, just give your answers in the chat box. I'll mark the answers. Thank you, Liliana. I'm assuming that is for the first question. All right, so here's my countdown for the first question, guys, before I bring up the poll for the second one. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, so for question 1, I'm ending the polls. All right, for question 1, 10% of you have gone with A, 5% of you have gone with B, 31% of you have gone with C, then there's a 5% for D, and 47% of you have gone for E. All right. Okay. All right, Anubhav and Liliana, I'm going to put your answers there beside this. Now I'm going to bring up the next poll for the next question, question 2. There it is on your screens now. So Vinod, Anubhav, all right, Liliana. So I'll add to E. Okay, I have 2 more for E. So probably that's about 48% of you for E. Okay. And about 32% for E. Great. All right, I'll start my countdown for question number 2. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay. So for 2, none of you have marked A as the correct answer. 47% of you believe it should be B. 19% believe C, 23% believe D, and 9% believe E. So guys, you can see a deceptively simple passage, and we have so many different people marking such different answers. So never be deceived by the simple language of a passage, okay? The questions can have ample traps. That is what I can see. Thank you, Liliana, Vinod, Abhi, for the answers here. Great. So Abhi has given B, Vinod has given B, Liliana has given B. So it's again B. Almost 50% of you have gone for B on question 2. Great. Here comes the poll for the third question. So question 3, the polls are there on your screen. Okay, I'll start my countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So on this passage, I think it will be more about the traps, but I can see that. So on question number 3, I'll end the poll now. I can still see movements. I'm holding off. All right, guys, I'm ending the poll. Okay, Vinod, thank you for the answer. So, Boitumelo Dinga, you're asking what's the difficulty level of this question? Well, the passage is 700 plus level. Different questions are of different difficulty levels. For example, question 3 is probably the more difficult of the lot. All right. So let me see. So question 3, I have 7% for A, 7% for B, 19% for C, 7% for D, and 57% for E, which is not the answer probably. Let me see. So as I said, question 3 was difficult, and that's quite evident from the fact that 57% of you have marked E as the answer on 3 and E is not the answer. All right. So we're going to see, we're going to talk about that. Let me quickly bring up the passage. Now, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into details in the passage, but I'm going to bring up the summary. What I'll point out to you guys is, and this is something that mapping that you need to do. So if you notice, this passage kind of has this paragraph has just 3 sentences, almost 3 or 4 sentences. So one sentence starts from here and ends here. Then you have a sentence which starts from here and ends here. And then you have a sentence which starts from here and ends here. Actually, 3 sentences. Absolutely. All right. So the first sentence talks about primarily defined by the popular press. Now, there's one thing I'll just point out to you, which I've noticed with my private sessions with students, private tutoring sessions. Sometimes students read something else and something else is given, guys. Okay. So instead of reading primarily defined by popular press, sometimes what the students read is primarily defined by popular press. Okay. Which is not the same. Primarily defined by the popular press, they read as defined by primarily the popular press, or defined. So somehow they jumble up the words here. But you have to be very careful. Primarily defined by popular press means mainly identified or mainly defined by the press. Okay. There was one of the options which talked about popularized by the press. So primarily defined by the popular press cannot be translated into popularized by the press. All right. So this is where you trip up. You read something which is not given, and be careful of that. So the first line tells you how press has defined the new woman. Okay. So the new woman is basically a modern understanding of femininity. And this modern understanding stresses on youth, on visibility. When we say visibility, whose visibility can it be? Obviously, the woman's visibility, and mobility, as well as a demand for greater freedom and independence. So here, clearly, we can understand that the term, the concept of new woman is defined in a certain way by press, and that definition is all about modern way of looking at femininity, which is all about youth, visibility, more freedom, more independence. This is how you summarize the first line. Okay. All right. While the exact origins of the term, so this line, if you read in detail, it tells you there isn't much clarity about how this term came to be. The origins are debated, all right, but the first mention kind of which brought the phrase to the reader's attention was this mention of the new woman between 2 writers. All right, so this is what the sentence says, and I have not kind of put it down there in my summary because it wasn't really a very important detail for me. It's not to say that you don't read this sentence. Please do. You never know what questions you will be asked on. So this point, the second line tells us that there isn't much clarity about who coined this term or how it came to be formed. Okay, there is just this first exchange we know of, but it's not known whether these writers coined it or not. All right. And the last line is a long one. Now, this I'm going to tell you how to read. The new woman emerged out of the social and cultural changes in the early 20th century America. And there's a dash there. You stop there. Information between the dashes is like information between brackets. But I've heard a lot of people, I've read a lot of people saying, don't pay attention to this information. Please don't commit this mistake, guys. I have come across ample questions where information within the dashes was of consequence. You must always relate. So first line here tells you the definition of new woman per the press. Second sentence tells you how exactly this term was coined is not known. So which is telling you basically the press simply defines new woman, but press has not really coined the term. All right. And then author tells you how this term really has come to be. The author is telling you the term has come out of a lot of social and cultural changes that took place in early 20th century. After that, if you have read this passage, you'll realize the portion between dashes talks about different changes. All right. The moment you realize that we are just talking about different changes here, just keep it in mind. What are the changes? If you have a detail-based question related to, okay, which of the following is or is not a change, then you come back to this portion. But otherwise, this is mostly about what. The main part of this paragraph is the new woman emerged out of social and cultural changes in the early 20th century and as such offered a way. Now, if I ask myself, based on my SC training, what offered a way to understand women's new visibility? What offered? The term new woman offered a way not only to understand women's new visibility. So this was the function of the term new woman. It helped to understand women's new visibility, her new presence in the public sphere, and it also helped to define the modern American identity in a period of unsettling change. So there are two things that this term did. Okay. This term reflected the changes in the identity of the modern American woman in a period of multiple disturbing changes. All right. And the term new woman, it was shaped by a lot of turmoil. So this is there. This is basically the summarization of this paragraph. All right. Similarly, if we look at the second paragraph, it now talks about the comparison of the new woman with an older version, that is a Victorian true woman. All right. And this, if you again read here, the new woman image was often positioned in opposition. Often positioned in opposition should not be taken to mean it was the opposite of. All right. Again, this is some kind of, I've often come across students reading this as, true woman was the exact opposite of new woman. No, it was often seen as in contrast to a new woman, but otherwise we can't say that it was the exact opposite. Okay. So the new woman image was often compared to the Victorian true woman. And this true woman, when we say which was associated, it is referring to true woman with an understanding of femininity as an essential timeless concept. So now if I relate that to the previous paragraph said new woman was a modern understanding of femininity. This was a timeless concept of femininity, which emphasized domesticity and submissiveness. And if I again recall back, this is how I read my passage. In the first paragraph, new woman emphasized on more independence, on public visibility, on youth. This is what I'm telling myself in my mind. So this is the contrast I tell myself. Okay. All right. So right away, I have the image of the new woman was juxtaposed, that is often positioned against the true woman of the Victorian era. True woman was stressed on the image of domesticity and submissiveness. Never mind if you don't know the meaning of submissiveness. All you know is if it is a contrast to the new woman, then it has to be the opposite of what the new woman was. She was more independent, and these people were not that independent. If she was more of a public figure, then these people were more of a domestic figure. So this is how you have to look for context when you have to understand the meaning of words which you don't know the meaning of. All right? Okay. So that's there. And then you have a however. So right away, you know the author is going to give us a contrast here. All right? So why is this contrast being offered here? We've got to realize, we've got to still discover it. The new woman did not express a unified image regarding women's changing roles. Okay, so the author is trying to draw a contrast between the true woman. True woman was one image, domesticity and submissiveness. New woman was not one image, okay, because her roles probably were changing. And as those here refers to what? The roles. So these roles varied by region, class, politics, race, etc., etc. All right. So the true woman's role was all about domesticity and submissiveness, but the new woman's role was not any one role, any one image. It changed. And then there are some examples given here. This line is given here to show how those roles could change depending on different things, different factors. She could be a suffragist. Who is a suffragist? This is here you have a noun phrase modifying a suffragist, an activist for women's rights. Flapper. Was a flapper a modern socialite? Okay, so the new woman didn't have to be always a political woman. She could be a modern socialite as well. She could be a fashionable Gibson girl. She could be a settlement house worker. She could be a factory laborer. She could be an actress. She could be anything. In fact, some of these images and meanings overlapped, allowing this new one to adopt some characteristic while renouncing others. That means what we are really saying is it doesn't mean that a suffragist has only got to be an activist for a woman's right. Maybe she can also be a little bit of something else here. All right, that's what I'm telling myself. All right, so new woman was not in a single image. The image varied depending on multiple factors. I tell myself this and I move forward. The last paragraph, I'll just quickly summarize it. It talks about different aspects of the new woman dominating different periods. So if you say the Gibson girl dominated 1890s, 1910s was the suffragist, and then in 1920s the flapper, and so on. Finally, what the author has to say, has to kind of emphasize or iterate on is that new woman was not about a still image, but a spectrum of visual expressions and behaviors. The same person could display different behaviors. Okay, and here the author goes so far to say that every woman could shape her own version of the new woman, depending on what she wanted to, show. So all in all, the passage is all about this new woman, came to be, and what did it really stand for. It didn't stand for any single image. It depicted a changing image in changing times. Okay, so now coming to the questions, guys. All of you have waited for long. Thank you for your, okay, I've got some more answers here. Let me quickly look at them. So Anubhav, Vinod, Shruti, all right, I've got your answers. Nitin, thank you. Okay, thank you so much. Good, I'm going to consider that. So now let's come quickly to question number 1. Now I'll just quickly give you the data, the percentage of people who chose. So 10% of you went with A, okay, 5% of you went with B, 31% of you went with C, 5% with this, and 48% with D. Now, guys, what was the main function of new woman? If I do pre-thinking, if I go back and do pre-thinking, this line tells me what the new woman offered to do. That means what was the function of new woman? Okay, and I understand two things. She offered the new woman offered a way not only to understand women's new visibility and presence, but also to define modern American identity. Correct? All right. So I tell myself that the new woman, mainly the primary function of the term new woman was to identify, okay, the changes that emerged in the public image of the modern woman. This I'm inferring from this portion. All right. And I'm also relating to the public image. And the new woman also defined the development of the modern American identity in a disturbingly changing society. This I tell myself and I move forward. Now look at how A is define how the modern American woman presented herself in the public domain. This is out and out a distortion. Definitely visibility has been used a number of times, but that was not the primary function of New Woman. It was not to define how the modern American woman presented herself in public domain. So I'm a new woman, I am more of a popular public figure. No, that was not the purpose of this term. So none of you, only 10% of you have marked, but do you realize now that this term is a very, very narrow understanding of the American woman? Okay, the term was not used to define how she presented. See, it was not used to define how she presented herself. It was a term defining that the new woman was a public figure. How she presented herself is not the point. So this is a total distortion. B says, again, 5% of you chose B. The term new woman primarily serves to indicate the emergence of a new type of American woman. New type is not the issue, guys. She was not a new type. She was a new image. And you can't, so new type is a distortion. Using the word new type is a distortion. I mean, if I say it's a new type of species, it simply doesn't mean the species has changed the image it has in public sphere, right? So here she was not a new type of woman. She was a modern definition of the American woman. All right. She did not dictate the social changes, guys. She was a product of the social changes. Okay. So therefore, I think a lot of you may not have paid attention to that second portion. C, define both the changes in the public image of modern American woman. Yes. Okay. And the modern American identity. So two things. Define both the changes in the public image. So there are this and the modern American identity. It is defining the changes and it is defining the modern American identity. If you go back to the pre-thinking that we did, if you look at this, hold on a sec, yeah, this part. Okay, look at this portion. And now, to understand women's new visibility and presence in public sphere, to define modern American identity, and clearly choice C matches up to that. Choice C is the correct answer. 31% of you marked this. Why is E incorrect? Although nearly 50% of you marked E. Let me see that, but before that, quickly D. This is not true. The comparison is not the purpose of new woman, guys. The question was, the term new woman is primarily used to do what? What is the function of the term new woman? The function is not to draw a comparison, so that's out. E. Now, E, if you remember, was how the term new woman was defined by the press. Okay, so this is very limited in scope. The purpose of the term new woman was not to emphasize youthfulness. This is how popular press defined new woman. All right. So definitely the term new woman was about youthfulness, was about mobility, was about independence. Okay. But this doesn't talk about the, overall American identity that it defined. And this is more from the point of view of the popular press, how they defined the new woman. So when you're reading a paragraph, it's very important to understand who is saying what. Clearly here, the author is not saying that the term new woman emphasized youthfulness. It's, if you go back to your passage, I'll just quickly take you back there. If you go back to your first paragraph, here it is. See, primarily defined by popular press, the new woman represented this. All right. So that is how the popular press was defined by the, how the term new woman was defined by the popular press. But ultimately what the new woman primarily offered a way to do was to understand women's new personality, new image, and to define the modern American identity. So easy and quick. All right, let me quickly move forward to question number 2 because we are running short on time. Guys, so you can see such a deceptively simple question and so many wrong answers. I wonder why you got it wrong, guys. Okay. I hope, Simran, you are able to connect again. So guys, I hope you can see why you got question 1 wrong. Is it clear to you? Is it clear? Question 1, is it clear, guys? So Utkal define both the changes and the modern American identity. Both is placed before the changes, right? So both will have two things. Two things are defined: the changes and the American identity. Okay. You have to use your sentence correction skills even when you are looking at CR or RC answer choices. Okay, because lots of twists can be there. All right, I can see that you guys have understood. So let me move to the next question. Here comes the next question. All right. None of you went for A. 50% of you marked B, which is the correct answer. Good. So this was a detail-based question. We will talk about why the others are incorrect. So 19% of you marked this, 23% marked this, 9% marked this. Let me quickly analyze this. Hold on to your questions here. You're welcome, Utkal. Just a minute. Yeah. So a supergist could never dress like a flapper. We can eliminate because clearly we are talking about overlapping images. So this is quite the opposite of the given information. B, an African American woman. So we're talking about an American woman of a different origin. All right, could be very different from the American one, that is from a woman who was an American American origin. Even if both were contemporary, so even if both belong to the same time, they could be very different. Yes, they could, since the new woman did not define any one single image. So this choice can definitely be inferred. Now, how C cannot infer? Can we say it was always the social and political changes that defined the new woman of a particular period? Not necessarily, right? That always distorts it. What we are given is social and cultural changes led to the emergence of new woman. All right. But later on, the term new woman kept changing for the periods, right? It was sometimes the political image which was uppermost, or it was a social image, or it was some other image. We can't say it was always the social and political changes. Okay. So this is a distortion here. That is why it is not the answer. See, the passage says the origins are debated, but we cannot say they are unknown. They are not clearly known and they are unknown are two different ways of putting the same thing. It's a distorted way of saying that the origins are not clearly known. So it's out. 23% of you chose D. You need to be very careful when you're going through the answer choices. Each and every word counts. The term new woman was coined by writers and popularized by the press. It was not popularized by the press, guys. It was defined by the popular press, as I told you earlier. Popular press does not mean press popularized the term. Okay? And it was not coined by the writers. That term was being mentioned between two writers. So be very, very careful. E is also out. Now we come to 3, where let me tell you what you guys have chosen. 7% of you went for A, 7% went for B, 19% went for C, 7% for D, and 57% went for E, which is not the correct answer. I'm going to talk to you about the distortions now. Listen carefully. Okay. The question is, which of the following differences can be drawn between the Victorian true woman and the new woman? Okay. So these are the points of distinction. All right. And from that, plus from the first paragraph, we can define that true woman was a traditional concept of the woman representing domesticity and meekness. Meekness, I know the meaning of submissiveness, meekness, but if you don't know, you can just continue thinking that she was a picture of domesticity and submissiveness. All right. On the other hand, the new woman was not a single image in terms of the role played by her. She varied in her image and role depending on multiple changing factors. The new woman was more demanding. Now, this I have from the first paragraph. She was more demanding and she was independent. And this is in contrast to the submissiveness of the true woman. So these are some of the points of contrast that I have when I rethink. And with these points in mind, I go to my answer choice analysis. I look at it. The Victorian true woman was the exact opposite of the image. Now, as I've already discussed, Exact opposite, no. She was often positioned in opposition. That means she was often compared, does not mean she was the exact opposite. Remember, the new woman could be anything. She could be a house worker also. All right. She need not be the exact opposite of the true woman. She could differ, but she need not be the exact opposite. So A is incorrect. The new woman lacked the time. So the new woman lacked the timeless femininity and traditional domesticity. Please understand, the new woman had a lot of other dimensions added to her personality, but nowhere does the passage say that she was no longer taking care of her home. All right, please understand. So there is this there is the passage says that the true woman was mostly seen as traditional domestic body, but the passage doesn't say that the new woman could not be a domestic body as well as a public figure. So again, this choice is a complete distortion. All right, again 7% of you marked B. The true woman was a traditional homemaker. So if I'm looking at this choice, this portion is correct. Remember, I divide into portions. Okay, traditional homemaker, content to obey. Now this part I can put under a question mark if I don't know the meaning of submissiveness, but if I do, I can let this be. Whereas, okay, the new woman was a more demanding in public feature. From the first paragraph, I do have she demanded greater independence, so I can definitely say she was more demanding in public feature. So in the exam, I would probably put C on hold if I don't know the meaning of submissiveness, because content to obey, I still would not have context. So I would see if I can rule out the other choices with more clarity. Anyway, C is correct. So we'll see how we can rule out the others. The true woman was the true embodiment of femininity. Can I say she was the true embodiment? Does it mean to say that the new woman was not feminine? Okay. Whereas the new woman was a dominating rebel. No, she was more demanding does not mean she was a rebel. It's an exaggeration, what I would call a hyperbolic choice. All right. 7% of you marked D. Okay, 19% of you marked C. I hope you marked it for the right reasons, guys. E, 57% of you marked this. Let's see where it's gone wrong. And you can see these are the kind of twists and turns that you can expect. The true woman played a single role. Okay, so far I'm okay. I'm cool with this. That of a domestic creature. Okay, I'm cool with this. Whereas the new woman played multiple roles at the same time. Now, did she play multiple roles at the same time? Does the passage say that she could be an activist and a modern socialite at the same time? She could adopt some characteristics of the others. That is not to say that she was four different people at the same time. That is a distortion. She played multiple roles. She displayed multiple images. Okay, does not mean that she could play multiple roles at the same time. She could play one role, but her image, her persona could have different dimensions. She could adopt any characteristics belonging to any role. Okay, this choice therefore misinterprets this difference and the meaning therefore gets distorted. So E is not the correct answer, guys. I hope you guys can see. So origins are debated on Vihar. If I say the origins of the computers are debated on, does it mean they're unknown? If you are going to conduct a debate, it means some sort of knowledge will definitely be there, but clarity is not there, or there is no conclusiveness about the information. But we can't say that they are unknown. All right, Vihar. So that again is a trap there. So guys, I'll quickly show you how we teach all of this. So if you look at the GMAT Viz course, you can see that simply 10 hours are involved in helping you learn this involved and evolved reading. Just 10 good hours dedicated to help you develop this process, teaching you how to use transition word, how to summarize paragraphs, how to contextualize words that you don't understand. And so this is just one part of it, the entire reading and comprehension portion. If you can see, first unit is a skill builder. It deals with how you have to, we literally hold your hand and show you how to read in an involved and evolved manner. And then the second unit talks about the main point, how to derive the main point and answer choice elimination ACE. We teach you all about the traps which are there. And then in the advanced concept, we take up each type of answer choice, each type of question, and talk to you about the framing of these questions and their answer choices and how incorrect answer choices are made on these. All right. So I hope you guys found this beneficial. I'm just going to bring up a small poll, guys, and I'll share the PDF of this webinar with you. So just bear with me for a moment while I bring up a poll where you can give me some feedback about this session today. All right. You can rate the session. Just give me a moment, guys. And if you have any questions related to your preparation, please ask. I'm there. You can also register for a free trial on that link, and those that you can contact us on that WhatsApp number. So if you have any questions, please go ahead. I'll just bring up the poll and give me a moment, guys. I'm going to answer your questions. There's a poll for you. You're welcome, Shruti, Liliana. So, Utkal, I didn't understand your question. Can we re-access this webinar in our course module? I think there is a recorded webinar of involved and evolved reading there. You can get that, I think. Yes. So let me share the PDF of this. Just a minute. Okay, I'm sharing the PDF of this webinar, guys. You can download it. You're welcome, Boitomelo. Very, very important that you inculcate this reading practice. So while GMAT is also good, in fact, while GMAT is as close as it can get to the original question patterns. So thank you, Liliana. Thank you, Shruti. Thank you, Dinga. Thank you, Pooja. Thank you, Utkal. Thank you, Vinod. I'm so glad you liked it. Vinod says it is one of the best ones so far. Most welcome, Vinod. You're welcome, Vishakha. So Anubhav, the PDF is being shared with you again, the same place where I was sharing the session passage with you. Maybe it's taking some time to reflect at your end. If you click on the files, you will see the RC webinar PDF being shared. So guys, thank you, Vihar. I really hope you benefit from this session. All right. I mean, I have seen so many of my students really, do so well once they have inculcated, involved and evolved reading in their, regimen. In fact, the process starts when we teach you how to break sentences and read when you're going through your RC portion, SC portion. And then we continue teaching you through the CR how to build structures. So Sahithi, if you have registered for this webinar series, I think you will get the link to the recording of this session anyways. In case you don't get it, you can write to support@gmatviz, they'll mail it to you. You're welcome, Aryan. I'm so glad you liked it. And I'll be even happier when you are able to actually utilize this, that will really be that will be the, how shall I put it this way, objective, target achieved kind of thing. It was wonderful interacting with you guys. I lost track of time. The webinars are usually supposed to end at 9 and I'm just like, okay, as long as the interaction was great today. So guys, Please remember all the things that we discussed in the session today. Reading the passage, develop the habit of engaging with the passage. That way you will not lose focus. That way you will not get lost. Okay? Learn to ask questions. Ask whys and concentrate less on the what. And when it comes to the answer choices, make sure that your answer choice is like under a magnifying glass, each and every word. Nothing escapes your attention. That is how you've got to look at it. All right. So great, guys. We'll again have, so the webinars will be there the next weekend also. We have another RC webinar coming up on 10th. So hope to see all of y'all on that day. That day, the webinar will be on deriving the main point. So today we did not concentrate much on that, but we'll be concentrating on that day. So Vinod, that is a wonderful compliment, honestly. Thank you so much for appreciating it. And I'm just so glad that you found this helpful, because this approach is not something that comes out of books. It comes out of the pain that I have seen in my students' eyes day after day when they try to, just get the hang of RCs and they are not able to, and they get lots of advice of this and that and it doesn't work. So this is something that I found worked for me, and I'm sure it's going to work for all of you. Be patient, okay? Give it time. Nothing can be achieved without giving it time and persevering. So all the best, guys. Wonderful having all of you here, and waiting to see you again. Looking forward to seeing you again on the next session. So a good day to you if you are in that part of the world, or a good day, a good night to all of you. And to my Indian friends, a very happy Holi. Hope the colors really bring a lot of colors of Holi, bring a lot of fun, love, and joy to your lives. Okay, so happy learning, guys. Good night.